Keep those snow shovels handy tomorrow as Maryland braces for another winter blast. Meteorologist Wyatt Everhart tracking when the snow will start falling. Members of the Black Caucus announced their priorities for 2024. New today, why they say they will not pursue changes to juvenile justice laws. A convicted felon is sentenced for selling drugs in Baltimore's Brooklyn Homes community. We take a closer look at the U.S. Attorney's efforts to put away violent repeat offenders.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 4.
Good afternoon, folks. Fox 45 is tracking our next weather maker on top of the freezing rain and weather that we've already been dealing with. More snow is heading into the weekend.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. We could see up to 3 more inches of snow tomorrow. Let's go straight to meteorologist Wyatt Everhart with details on this next storm system. Wyatt?
Yeah, Mary, Kai, winter weather advisory does start late tonight, so we're fine the rest of this evening. I want to make that clear. But as we go through the overnight hours into the day tomorrow, another day we'll have winter weather advisory type conditions. Light and steady snow. Accumulation totals likely to be in that 2 to 4 inch range. Many spots probably averaging 2 to 3 inches, but nonetheless, a big nuisance and slick roads will be a concern. You can see the air temperatures today sneaking above freezing, but they'll be dropping as we go into the overnight hours, and that is when the storm is set to arrive. So big picture here as we check the satellite view, you can see it's the kind of leading edge of that system bringing the clouds now, but the backside of the storm has yet to arrive. That will happen as we go into the overnight hours. Now we're going to talk more about the exact type of snow totals we may see out of the system. All the details coming up.
Wyatt, thank you. Well, the State Highway Administration says it's ready to deal with the poor conditions, but drivers still need to prepare themselves for some slippery roads out there.
We understand a lot of folks have to go out and do things, so game plan is the big thing to do, is to never be in a hurry, always give yourself a lot of extra time.
AAA says it is best to stay home and stay off the roads if you can. If you must go out, drive slowly, of course. You'll also want to increase your distance behind a car by 5 to 6 seconds. And when you brake in slippery conditions, do so slowly, sort of pump your brakes to reduce your risk of sliding.
Put the power of the Weather Authority Storm Center in your hands. Download the free WBFF Weather Authority app for your smartphone. Use our powerful Doppler radar to follow storms to your street. Go to your app store and search WBFF to get started. We are tracking multiple stories out of Annapolis tonight as the session continues.
The Legislative Black Caucus is rolling out its priorities. In addition to education and health care access, the lawmakers are looking at public safety plans.
Plus, there are concerns over the budget and how the state will pay for all of its programs. We have team coverage on this session. Let's go right to Mackenzie Frost, who's at the State House with the priorities of the Black Caucus. Mackenzie?
Yeah, Kai, so what we learned today and what's clear is that the Legislative Black Caucus does not want to see any changes to the current juvenile justice laws. Now, we know there have been significant conversations about making potential changes to the current laws right now. The Juvenile Justice Reform Act, that's the one that prevents kids 13 and younger from facing certain nonviolent misdemeanor charges. There is a push to extend the length of probation for certain offenses. That push is coming from City State's Attorney Ivan Bates, as well as the state's attorney from Prince George's County, Aisha Braveboy. Those two top prosecutors are also calling for changes to the Juvenile Interrogation Act. They want to see the defense attorneys be required to go in person during the questioning when law enforcement questions a young person. And I asked the Legislative Black Caucus where they stand on making changes to that specific law. Does the caucus, does it support making changes to the Juvenile Interrogation Act?
The Legislative Black Caucus last year in the Maryland General Assembly passed
news.
Mackenzie, thank you. We look forward to seeing that dashboard. Meantime, lawmakers are trying to finalize the governor's budget proposal and avoid a massive deficit. Governor Moore says he's focusing on the future and promising to fully fund the state's Blueprint for Education, or Kerwin plan. The governor also announced $1.8 million for small business innovation research and a $500,000 for the Pavel LePere Innovation Acceleration Grant Program.
Governor's budget comes in just over $63 billion for fiscal year 2025, which he says shrinks the state's structural deficit without raising taxes. But with many big ticket items on the table, Fox 45's Jessica Babb hears from county leaders with questions on how they're going to get funded. Jessica?
Well, with expensive issues like education and transportation, counties say there need to be long-term funding solutions in place so the counties aren't the ones feeling the brunt and holding the bag.
Happy Budget Day.
With a new budget announced,
We will achieve each of these goals without raising taxes on Marylanders.
and Maryland facing a daunting deficit.
This budget shrinks the structural deficit by 34%.
There are some tough decisions and challenges ahead.
There's key questions about how Governor Wes Moore's proposal will get paid for.
The funding sources are disappearing.
My major concern is to ensure that we are not passing the buck to the counties long term to carry too much of the burden that we can't sustain or afford.
Andrew Friedson, Montgomery County's council president, says with $3.3 billion in cuts to the Department of Transportation, it was going to cost them big in the county.
Included in those cuts, among others, was over $17 million in cuts to local bus service. Our local ride-on bus service serves some of our most vulnerable residents.
But since Governor Moore has announced a one-time, one-year solution of taking $150 million from the state's rainy day fund to offset some of those costs.
Well, it stops the bleeding, certainly. It's kind of like sending an ambulance to stabilize the patient.
But now the clock is ticking with the next challenge of sustainability, with a need for long-term solutions.
A punt on the difficult conversations on that expensive wish list of projects that do not have funding sources, punting those difficult conversations to next year.
And it's not just transportation. There's other big ticket items that will cost billions, from $1 billion in clean energy initiatives, $3 billion on the Red Line project, and $3.8 billion on the Kerwin Commission and education reform.
We're struggling with Kerwin.
It was a gut punch.
We need the state to step up to help us to fund it. And we need to make sure that we are doing it in a way that doesn't fall back on the historical challenges we have faced, that when state challenges occur, they lean on the counties to solve them.
There's other initiatives in Governor Moore's budget, including $127 million in funding for local law enforcement agencies, $115 million to address housing needs, and $270 million for the child care scholarship, among many others. When the bills come due, the burden could still be on taxpayers.
These burdens that are passed along to the county do not free our residents from the burdens to pay for them.
And while some county leaders say they are optimistic about working with Governor Moore's administration, they say they're expecting the deficit is only going to grow in the next few years, which could put taxpayers in a tricky situation with the potential for tax increases on the horizon. Jessica Babb, Fox 45 News.
Jessica, thank you. And as Jessica mentioned, the state's rainy day fund will sit at $2.3 billion within the recommended savings level. Governor Moore has announced that he's pulling $150 million from it to offset a transportation deficit, despite a warning from former Governor Larry Hogan as he left office.
It would be a mistake for the legislature to use its newly expanded budgetary power to return to the old habits of raiding the rainy day fund or recklessly spending down the surplus.
The governor says dipping into the rainy day fund won't become a pattern. This morning, Fox 45 spoke with taxpayer advocate David Williams about the concerns he has with the decision to pull money from the fund.
The problem is when you raid that fund is your credit rating goes down, right? So it's going to be more costly to borrow money for construction projects. So it's going to have long-term implications. Plus, you're going to have legislators going, wait a second, you're raiding the fund for your projects. We want some projects.
Yesterday, we asked you, with a looming budget deficit, what should lawmakers do? 94% of those who voted believe lawmakers should shrink government rather than raise taxes.
Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost will be in Annapolis following every step of this year's legislative session. You can watch all of her coverage on air and online at foxbaltimore.com.
We are following a developing story in Baltimore County where the principal of Pikesville High School was allegedly recorded making racially charged comments.
The school system says it's investigating the recording, which includes derogatory remarks about students and staff. But the principal's union is asking for a pause in any rush to judgment.
I seriously don't understand why I have to constantly put up with these dumb here every day. Between these ungrateful black kids who can't test their way out of a paper bag.
Well, the voice in that recording is allegedly Pikesville principal Eric Eiswert, seen here on the school's website. The 41-second clip includes derogatory comments about black students and some school staffers, as well as members of the Jewish community. In an email to parents Wednesday afternoon, Baltimore County School Superintendent Dr. Miriam Rogers called the statements deeply disturbing, but said they cannot confirm the veracity of the recording. As the school system investigates, the principals union is promising full cooperation.
In a statement to Project Baltimore, union leader Billy Burke writes, quote, "The outrageous language in the audio is not the language, thoughts, or character of Principal Eiswert." It goes on to say, "We ask that there be a pause in any rush to judgment and that we act respectfully to his family, staff, and each other." The statement does not address previous reports indicating union leadership the recording may have been faked using artificial intelligence.
Well, Fox 45 News will stay on this story as the investigation continues to evaluate the authenticity of this recording.
Going after repeat violent offenders by any means necessary, we detail the history of one convicted felon after his sentencing in federal court.
Could a Republican win a Maryland Senate seat? A political analyst breaks down what it could mean for the state and the country.
The Ravens are getting ready to play their first game in a hopeful Super Bowl push. How the team is getting ready for this Saturday.
A live look at M&T Bank Stadium as the Ravens get ready to make their run through the playoffs. The Super Bowl push will start right here in Baltimore with a matchup against the Texans this weekend. Sports Unlimited Rocco DeSangro in the studio now with the latest on how the team is getting prepped and ready. Rocco?
Mary, first of all, that atmosphere Saturday is going to be electric, as expected. They've been hard at work in Owings Mills, the Ravens have. For one, a lot has changed from that Week 1 regular season matchup between these two teams. While rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud has gotten so much better, so have the Ravens, adding more talent to their roster since that season opener. For one, Kyle Van Noy, who joined the team Week 4 from his couch, only to set a career high with 9 sacks. And then you have this guy, the late addition of Dalvin Cook at running back, who is just 1 year removed from a 1,000-yard rushing season. Cook, who was originally signed to the practice squad, was just signed to the team's 53-man roster. And there's a chance that he could be a factor in the backfield for this divisional round showdown.
Dalvin will be in there. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for him and for us. I'll be looking forward to seeing how he does. It's new. We haven't seen him out there. Just like you guys haven't seen him, we haven't seen him. We've seen him in practice. He looks good. And, he's going to be out there like everybody else, trying to do whatever he can do to help us win the game.
They call it 31 number. I'm gonna be out there. So I'm going. I'm gonna be on the field. I'm gonna be ready to make a play. But for me, though, honestly, Gus, Justice, they put the work in all year, man. You gotta credit those guys. So whatever my role is, whatever they call upon me, they're gonna get 1,000% out of that one.
While Cook is expected to get snaps in Saturday's game, it's uncertain whether or not that will be the case for Mark Andrews. The star tight end coming off that ankle injury was a full participant in practice, though. For the second straight day, he's being listed as questionable.
All right, thanks, Rocco. Hey, just clouds rolling in right now, but it's the leading edge of another winter weather maker for Maryland. We're tracking it carefully. We're seeing those clouds thickening up back into the Tennessee Valley, and 2 waves of energy really set to come into the state, mainly into the early hours, I should say, of Friday. Right now, M&T Bank Stadium, there's a live shot for you. Going to be a huge game Saturday, as we just heard, and it will be a very cold and blustery game behind this storm system. 34 right now, BWI just 2 degrees above the freezing mark, and these numbers across the central part of the state and across the Baltimore region that are hovering just slightly above freezing, set to drop tonight. So we'll be going below freezing just as this new storm arrives into the early morning hours of Friday. Light south breeze right now, not much wind to speak of. That's good. If you've got plans to get out and about this evening, you're fine. No worries whatsoever. But as we go into the early morning hours, even the very early part of the commute, we're looking for snow showers to begin to move into the state. So it's a snowy Friday scenario around here, and then a blustery cold Saturday in behind that snow. We do see a warm up in the offing as we go into next week. That football forecast, you can see the numbers running into the 20s, and it is going to be, again, just a cold scenario there on Saturday. Radar satellite pictures, you can see cloudy with a few mixed snow showers, mainly off to our west right now, down toward West Virginia and Kentucky. Kind of the main energy with this split system is still back west into the upper Midwest. And so that's really the part of the storm that will kind of kick it up a little bit, so to speak, as we go into the day on Friday. Future scan shows the arrival of the leading edge of the snow toward about 4 a.m., 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's going to be problematic for the morning commute. Then snow continues on and off through 11 a.m. And then we've got some additional moisture on the backside. We'll have to see how well that wraps into the system, because that could impact the final totals with the storm. Ultimately, we do look for a couple of inches to ultimately settle into the state with the arrival of the system. Broadly speaking, I think 2 to 4 for most of us, but closer to the state line, totals could be a little bit higher if the storm kind of lingers up there a little longer, and certainly we'll see lower totals to points south of us. Here's that 7-day forecast, and you can see the trend here. Cold and blustery for the Ravens on Saturday, that should be. And ultimately, we look for a significant warm-up into the early days of next week. So if you're a little bit tired of the winter weather scenario, there is some relief coming next week.
Wyatt, thank you. Federal officials sending a message to repeat offenders. The latest on a sentencing they hope makes Baltimore a safer place.
Republicans on Capitol Hill giving their final arguments in their impeachment case against the Secretary of Homeland Security. I'm Christine Frizzell with What's Next.
On Capitol Hill today, GOP lawmakers continue to lay out their case against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. They claim he violated his oath, broke the law, and deserves to be impeached. Democrats call the effort political, but it is unfolding in the midst of one of the worst border crises in American history. Christine Frizzau reports.
Winter means those already sleeping on the streets in subpar conditions now have to fear for their lives.
It's too cold. I believe we won't survive another night with these cold temperatures.
As some migrants wait on a bridge in Texas, others await their next steps in big cities they've traveled to by bus. New York City Councilwoman Ina Vernikoff posting this video of migrants arriving at a high school in New York City. The Denver Gazette reporting on the difficult dilemma at its hospital, Denver Health. A surge in new immigrant patients from South and Central America, equating to 8,000 people and 20,000 visits, costing $10 million in additional uncompensated care in the last year. Taxpayers left to foot the bill, there and elsewhere. And in largely Democratic California, voters asked if U.S. borders are secure in preventing people from entering the country illegally, overwhelmingly said not secure. 62%.
Move to the side.
City by city, town by town, all roads lead to Washington, where lawmakers continue to work on solutions. 14 Democrats this week joining Republicans to denounce President Biden's, quote, open border policies, as GOP lawmakers press ahead with their impeachment case against the man in charge, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
As a result of the reckless actions by Secretary Mayorkas, no American is safe.
I believe he's violated his oath.
Democrats argue there's no legal basis for impeachment.
This isn't a real impeachment. It's a predetermined, pre-planned, partisan political stunt.
The hearing was the second of two on the matter, with a committee vote on whether to impeach Secretary Mayorkas scheduled for January 31st, likely to be followed by a full vote in the House sometime next month. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau.
Well, the results are in for Wednesday's national question of the day. We asked what issue is most important to you in the upcoming election. 47% of you said immigration, 39% said economy, 6% said foreign policy, and 8% said crime. That brings us to today's national question of the day. Who do you trust more on the issues that matter to you, Joe Biden or Donald Trump? To make your voice heard, head to foxbaltimore.com, click on the Pulse tab. Sheriffs from across the state are endorsing a Republican Senate candidate, but will it move the needle on Election Day? Taking a closer look at John Tykert's chances. A plea to bring their loved ones home, hearing from the families of the hostages in Gaza as they ask lawmakers in Annapolis for help.
A convicted felon who once had an attempted murder charge overturned was sentenced in federal court today.
The U.S. Attorney for Maryland says this case is an example of his office going after violent criminals by any means necessary. Fox 45's Alexa Ashwell joins us in studio with details on what happened. Alexa.
Okay, Mary, the U.S. Attorney for Maryland, Eric Barron, has vowed to focus on guns and repeat violent offenders and getting both off the streets by any legal means necessary. Today's sentencing, one of the latest examples. Here inside federal court, a judge sentenced convicted felon and repeat gun offender Terrence Peavy to more than 2 years in prison. The 41-year-old's conviction part of a federal plea deal, guilty to possession of a firearm and ammunition by a prohibited person. The case, initially filed in state court, details back in February 2023. Investigators witnessed over Baltimore's City Watch cameras Peavy selling drugs in South Baltimore's long-troubled Brooklyn Homes community. After a brief pursuit, the document goes on to say Peavy was arrested and found to be in possession of a .32 caliber revolver, a violation because Peavy was on probation at the time and also had 5 prior convictions dating back to 2002 that prohibited him from possessing a firearm, according to court documents. One of those cases, part of a plea deal, after a prior attempted murder conviction was overturned back in 2022. Guilty after guilty, consequence after consequence, that didn't stop Peavy. The Office of the U.S. Attorney for Maryland says this case is an example of the enhanced focus on guns, RICO cases, and repeat violent offenders.
We are headed in the right direction.
Just 2 weeks ago, U.S. Attorney for Maryland Eric Barron, alongside other federal, state, and local partners, announcing plans to ramp up his Al Capone style of prosecution in 2024.
Going forward, we will continue investigating and prosecuting large RICO cases like the one in court this morning, but we will also continue to employ strategic and preventative law enforcement measures, especially by using any legal means necessary to remove those who illegally possess or use guns in our communities.
Peavy, the latest example. And this afternoon, Barron released a statement that said Mr. Peavy represents exactly the kind of offender we're looking to take off of the streets. Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Alexa, thank you. There's also a push in Annapolis to focus on sexual assault offenders. Governor Wes Moore and Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates backing legislation responding to last year's murder of Baltimore tech CEO Pamela Pear. The law would restrict some sexual assault offenders from earning time off their sentence for good behavior. The 26-year-old tech executive was killed in her Baltimore apartment back in September. Authorities say the man charged with killing her, Jason Billingsley, was released early for good behavior.
One example, one time is one time too many. We want to make sure that we put laws in place that will keep all the citizens protected, and we don't want to go ahead and see it 3, 4, 5, 10 times. But we need to make sure if this law was in place, then we feel strongly that we would not have the victims in this case.
It means to me that no other family and no other father has to go through the loss that we've experienced that could have been avoided with a slight change in the legislation that has been in effect since 2016.
This morning, Fox 45 News spoke with Eurypsy Morgan from the community group Peace about this legislation. She says changes to the current system are desperately needed to stop tragedies like Pama's death.
There was no room for any board to say, hey, look, as they had in the past when he had been up for parole, and the board at that point had said no, but then this automatic diminution of credits kicked in, and so they had to release him. Taking away that authority when you have reasonable people sitting around saying, no, this person should not be released, but then they are because of the automation, right? That's what needed to be fixed.
Fox 45 News will be tracking the progress of that bill and all the major developments from Annapolis during this legislative session. Mackenzie Frost following every step over the next 3 months. You can watch all of our coverage on air and online at foxbaltimore.com.
A man is robbed at knife point in Anne Arundel County. Police responded to reports of a fight at an Exxon gas station on Campmeet Road in Linthicum. They say 44-year-old Lakita Johnson and the second suspect approached the victim, pulled out a knife and tried to rob him. Police were able to catch Johnson while the second suspect escaped. Anyone with information should contact Anne Arundel County Police.
A 22-year-old victim was shot along North Conkling Street in southeast Baltimore. Baltimore police say officers found him along Pulaski Highway around 1 this morning. That victim was taken to the hospital for treatment. Anybody with information should contact Baltimore police. Now, according to Baltimore police, 6 people have been killed in the city this year and 19 have survived being shot. The continued violence in the city, both a major focus in the current legislative session and for candidates in the 2024 election.
In the race for Maryland's open U.S. Senate seat, one Republican candidate is calling public safety his top priority. Retired Air Force General John Teichert launched a law enforcement coalition made up of several sheriffs from across the state. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor has more on who's involved and what political experts are saying about that endorsement. Rebecca?
Yeah, Kai, today, Teichert securing the support of 4 county sheriffs with a promise to push tough on crime priorities in D.C. Political analyst John Deedy, who I spoke to today, he says it's a promise that he has heard Maryland voters calling for, but he's not sure if it's enough to win over a historically Democratic state.
I wanted them to know that I trusted them, that I appreciated them, and that ultimately I fully supported them.
A group of Maryland sheriffs from Talbot, Worcester, Wicomico, and Dorchester County banding together to back John Teichert for U.S. Senate, as Teichert mutually pledges to back the blue.
Unfortunately, here in Maryland and in many places around our country, our politicians, including my opponents, are saying just the opposite. And as a result, we see these pro-criminal policies that ultimately degrade law and order in our communities.
Pointing specifically to the state's controversial juvenile justice reform laws.
It has increased the juvenile crime rate. It has emboldened juveniles, and we need leadership.
Wicomico County Sheriff Mike Lewis says electing a candidate who understands the current challenges facing local law enforcement is critical. And as a retired Air Force general, Lewis believes Teichert's military background makes him the best man for the job.
General Teichert epitomizes leadership. He's been on the front line.
This year's Maryland General Assembly issue, that's the number one thing they're talking about, that they want to deal with that problem quickly.
According to political analyst John Deedy, a promise to prioritize public safety will resonate with voters. However,
the problem is this is a national election for the United States Senate, and we are a polarized country politically in Washington. Electing him to the Senate makes Mitch McConnell the majority leader. Also, Maryland is a strong Democratic state.
Among the candidates running for the Democratic nomination, Teichert also facing some stiff competition between Representative David Trone and Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks.
David Trone will be able to, if he's the nominee, will be able to spend him to death. If it's Angela Alsobrooks, she's got the political establishment behind her.
Deedy calling the chances of any Republican winning this election an uphill battle.
They have the demographics against them. The last time a Republican was elected to the United States Senate from Maryland was in 1980.
But Teichert remaining confident in his belief Maryland voters are hungry for change.
They are understanding that conservatives have the message that they need to make their lives and communities better, and it can only be brought about by leaders, not by politicians.
Ultimately, time will tell what voters decide. Maryland's primary election is scheduled for May 14th and the general election for November 5th. Reporting live from the control room, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Thank you, Rebecca. For our full coverage on the Senate race, head to foxbaltimore.com. One person is hurt after a building explodes in D.C. It happened around 9:30 this morning in Annapolis in Southeast. Authorities say a gas leak caused an explosion and fire at a local business. Neighboring buildings were evacuated. That included a daycare. One person was injured by flying debris from the explosion and was taken to a hospital.
The families of some of the people taken hostage by Hamas are in Annapolis today, demanding the safe return of the remaining hostages. The families met with members of the newly formed Maryland Jewish Legislative Caucus, sharing loved ones' stories of survival and asking them to support calls to release the people still being held by Hamas. The hostages have now been in captivity for just over 100 days.
The released hostages, we got a proof that she's alive, but her wound is very neglected. Her arm is not functioning. She can barely move her fingers, and they're turning their colors. Romy is a 23-year-old woman. She didn't start her life yet.
What we ask, I mean, we're not here with any political agenda. And we know that this conflict is complex and it won't be solved today or tomorrow. But the question of the hostages, this shouldn't even be a question. This really is about humanity.
The meeting comes as hostage negotiations stall in Gaza. This week, Hamas released a series of videos with 3 hostages. The videos appear to show the bodies of 2 hostages, while a third claims they were killed by an Israeli airstrike. Israeli officials believe there are still more than 130 hostages in Gaza, and at least 25 of those hostages are dead.
Well, the action in Annapolis comes as the fighting continues overseas. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza says nearly 11,000 children have been killed in Israeli strikes since the Hamas attacks on October 7th. Now, the United Nations is also stressing the severity of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, saying civilians are starving and the war has brought famine and with incredible speed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will continue pushing forward with this offensive. He also told the U.S. that he's against the establishment of a Palestinian state after the war is over. The United States has called on Israel to scale back its war against Gaza's Hamas rulers and consider a 2-state solution. A scathing report says Uvalde, Texas police acted without urgency during the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Texas. The changes parents hope to see in the wake of police failures.
Newly unredacted documents show executives at Meta allegedly knew their platforms were exposing kids to online predators. I'm Atrell Nashar with what we're learning coming up.
Had a slightly milder day here in Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic, but now the wind chill now down below freezing. And as we look to the west, we do see our next weather maker already on the march. We'll talk about when it arrives, how much snow you can expect for Friday. Coming up here on Fox 45 News.
Making headlines, a scathing report from the Department of Justice says the Uvalde school massacre could have been stopped sooner. The nearly 600-page critical incident report is now public nearly 20 months after the Robb Elementary School shooting, which left 19 students and 2 teachers dead. Federal officials say police who responded to the active shooter, quote, demonstrated no urgency and didn't even treat it like an active shooter situation. The DOJ blames failed communication, failed leadership, inadequate technology, and inadequate training. We're learning more about findings in a New Mexico lawsuit against Facebook and Instagram's parent company, Meta. Well, newly unredacted documents show executives at Meta were aware of their algorithm, which gave predators access to underage users. National correspondent Dr. El Nashar has the story.
Newly revealed evidence appears to back up claims that when it comes to kids, Facebook and Instagram parent company Meta prioritized product growth over safety. In its lawsuit against the company, New Mexico Attorney General Raul Torres alleges executives did not take immediate action when internal findings from 2021 said 100,000 children per day were receiving explicit content, including pictures from adults, according to the Wall Street Journal.
They're designed in a way to actually funnel likely victims of sexual exploitation to potential predators.
A Meta spokesperson tells us they want teens to have a safe experience online, pointing to their dozens of tools to support kids and their parents. Just Thursday, the company launched this night nudge feature for teens to discourage activity after 10 p.m. The spokesperson says, "We've spent a decade working on these issues and hiring people who have dedicated their careers to keeping young people safe and supported online." The complaint mischaracterizes our work using selective quotes and cherry-picked documents.
They are not incentivized to protect the children that they are monetizing from.
Titania Jordan, co-author of Parenting in a Tech World, says Meta could easily make changes.
Like giving the parent or caregiver the opportunity to say, you know what, I don't want my kid on Instagram from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And when I want them to be on it, I'm going to hit a toggle and allow them.
She and lawsuits like New Mexico's argue Meta is concerned about the wrong things. According to the lawsuit, Meta was scrambling in 2020 to address an Apple executive whose 12-year-old was solicited on the platform, noting this is the kind of thing that pisses Apple off to the extent of threatening to remove us from the App Store. The CEOs of 5 top social media companies, including Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, will soon have to answer to lawmakers for what they say are systemic failures to protect kids online when they testify during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing at the end of the month. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atra El-Nashar.
Well, from Seattle to the Jersey Shore, nearly 70 million people under a winter weather alert across the country. Just days after widespread deadly winter weather, a new round of snow and ice is expected into the weekend. That's due to several storm systems riding along the Arctic air mass. And taking a live look right now at the Inner Harbor and our weather radar as we brace for more of that winter weather. More snow is on the way. Meteorologist Wyatt Everhart has more. Wyatt?
Hey, thank you very much, Kai. And yeah, I mean, a wintry look, no question about it, across much of the country, including Maryland, where we still have a solid snowpack. I mean, sure, above freezing for a few hours today, but still not much melting. And now we have more on the way. Kind of 2 waves of energy here with this low pressure area. It's not a well-organized storm right now, and it will kind of get organized at the last minute, we think, therefore minimizing snow totals, but still enough to create a real nuisance for drivers for a workday Friday around here. Temperatures right now at and just above freezing, 34 right now in Aberdeen. We've got 39, the warm spot in Annapolis, but we're at freezing now in Westminster at 32. There's that winter weather advisory, includes all of central Maryland, and we anticipate even maybe a little more intense storm by the time it gets north of us. If your travels take you towards, say, Philadelphia, probably even more of a storm as they go north and east of Maryland. Nonetheless, around here, it will be cold enough for all the snow to stick as these temperatures fall through the 20s tonight, and we bring in a more intense system as we go into the early morning hours of Friday and even to the mid part of the day tomorrow. So it's a snowy Friday setting up and then a warmer scenario in the next week. In the short term behind that storm, we're talking 20s and wind chills in the teens for that Ravens game on Saturday. So feeling wintry the next couple of days. Not much right now other than just increasing clouds across the state. The main energy with the system still well off to the west. It will take several more hours, probably talking about another 12 hours to really get into Maryland. Timing here, Future Scan, this is 4 a.m. Friday morning when the storm really begins to arrive. And then as we go from, say, 4 a.m. to about the late morning, say midday Friday, that's probably the core of the event. After midday tomorrow, we'll taper probably to more snow showers and then clearing out as we go into Friday night and into early Saturday. But then we bring in those cold winds for the game on Saturday. Some snow blowing around too, probably. You can see the totals. Broad 2 to 4 inch rains likely, less as you go south and a little bit north as you go north and particularly northeast toward Elkton and on up into Newark, Delaware. You can see the trend here for the 7-day forecast. For the game itself, blustery, cold 27. We have a sunny scenario Sunday, a calm day. And then as we go into next week, temperatures start to push up. In fact, we're talking about 50 degrees plus, if you can believe it, literally just Wednesday next week. So if you don't love the cold Arctic environment, there are changes ahead.
Wyatt, thank you, sir. Wake up tomorrow morning with our Fox 45 weather team as they continue to track the overnight snow and freezing temperatures. Meteorologist Amy Aronson has your forecast starting at 4:30 a.m. And coming up at 5 o'clock on Fox 45, a candidate running for U.S. Senate voices urgency to address public safety, the coalition he's introducing. So we have an update for you right now regarding a possible government shutdown. The Senate actually has passed a last-minute stopgap spending bill. Tomorrow is the last day of funding for parts of the federal government. So a shutdown would affect military, construction, veterans, transportation, the Energy Department, and much more. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says it's critical that Congress keep the government open, while House Speaker Mike Johnson is saying lawmakers are working towards an extension.
You cannot do things with one party in a divided Congress.
In spite of what people are saying on both sides, this is a better agreement than we had.
Well, the sticking point on the deal is that House Republicans want to address immigration first. The Senate passed the budget bill, and that means it's now on the House to either agree to or reject the stopgap measure before the deadline. Wyatt.
All right, Kai, and on the weather front, it's relatively quiet for the next several hours here in Maryland. The evening, it will just be an evening of falling temperatures from temperatures just above freezing to below freezing tonight. As that happens, our next weather maker comes in, brings the snow as we go into your early day on Friday. So here's that extended forecast one more time, recapping it. It's basically going to be a wintry Friday around here. Snow tapering off to showers later in the day, though, and then a blustery cold Saturday for the Ravens. Hopefully the Houston Texans will find that uncomfortable. And then beyond that, we actually see a warming trend, pretty significant one, in the early and the middle part of next week.
All right, Wyatt, thank you. Well, some of you have been sending in your snow pictures, and we love all of them. Take a look at this. Michael sent in this picture of little Carmen and her dog Molly, both adorable. This is Carmen's first time playing in the snow, and she'll get some fresh snow to play in tomorrow. All right. And if you went sledding today, built a snowman, or even had a snowball fight, we want to see that. Hopefully no one got hurt. Scan that QR code on your screen. That will take you to foxbaltimore.com, where you can upload your pictures and videos, all powered by Stackler. Coming up on Fox 45 News at 5 o'clock, the Ravens are gearing up for their playoff matchup this weekend, how the team and its fans are getting ready. But first, public safety is on the minds of lawmakers this session. Why some argue addressing the juvenile justice laws is not a priority.
I'm Wyatt Everhart. We're tracking our next wintry weather maker as it tracks towards Maryland.
More voices pushing public safety is a top priority this legislative session, but not juvenile justice reform.
Plus, holding violent repeat offenders accountable in Baltimore City, the sentencing today, and how a recent partnership is playing a role.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 5.
We're going to bring crews in probably midnight or a little bit after that. That way we're totally in place by the time that storm starts to impact the region. And then we'll be doing our shifts and going all day long and all into the evening until that storm is passed.
A live look across our region tonight. Preparations underway as we track our next weather maker that will bring even more snow to the area overnight and into the weekend. Thank you for staying with us, everybody. I'm Mary Bubala.
And I'm Kai Jackson. We are expecting up to 3 inches of snow in many spots across Maryland.
And we're tracking extremely cold conditions for the Ravens playoff game this Saturday. Let's bring in meteorologist Wyatt Everhart with the latest on all of this for us. Just joyful.
Yeah, Mary Kai, winter is not done with us yet, okay? We know that much for sure, at least not until after this weekend. We've got a snowy day on tap tomorrow. It's not that it's going to be like a massive dump of snow, but it'll be enough to create problems on the roads. And Friday, people have to get a lot of times trying to get around for work and also trying to get on a weekend trip. It's going to be tough tomorrow. We get that winter weather advisory already up for all of central Maryland. And that is because our next wave of low pressure is already deepening and beginning to develop in a little more significant way off to our west, centered out towards St. Louis now. But as we go into the late night hours and into the early day tomorrow, that's what we can expect. Another round of snow with some accumulations building up, not just on the roads, but on top of the snowpack we already have out there. There it is for you. Quiet tonight, at least. Get done anything you need to. But as we go into the early morning hours tomorrow, we're looking for slick roads and slushy conditions out there as we get another snowy round of weather.
All right, Wyatt, thank you. And a warning for drivers as the snow and ice makes road conditions dangerous. Don't forget, Wyatt said we're going to get some snow on top of what's already ice and snow, so that's a bit of that road pack, that snow pack. AAA says it's best to stay home and stay off the roads if you can. If you do have to go out, drive slowly. You'll also want to increase your following distance by 5 to 6 seconds, or roughly 2 to 3 car lengths. And when you brake, do so slowly to reduce your risk of sliding.
And there's an easy way to track snow plows and see when they'll come to your neighborhood. The State Highway Administration has a tracking page on its website. That means you can track where the plows are and how long they will be until they get to your house. You can also see where they've been.
Wake up tomorrow morning with Fox 45 Morning News as we continue to track the overnight snow and freezing temperatures. Meteorologist Amy Aronson has your full forecast starting at 4:30 a.m.
And anytime snow hits, you can have up-to-the-minute forecasts right at your fingertips. Download the Fox 45 Weather Authority app. Just search WBFF in your app store.
The Legislative Black Caucus is rolling out its priorities for this session.
In addition to education, healthcare access, and transportation access, lawmakers are looking at public safety plans.
And they're not the only ones looking to address the issue. One candidate for U.S. Senate is announcing a new coalition, which she says will return law and order to communities.
We have team coverage tonight, starting with Mackenzie Frost, live from the State House with exactly what the Legislative Black Caucus is pushing for. Mackenzie?
Yeah, Mary, so this group has several different areas of focus, including criminal justice, but it's clear that the group is not interested in making any changes to the current juvenile justice system. The first full week of session.
1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check. 1, 2.
Filled with priority announcements.
We're going to go ahead and get started.
Thursday morning, the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland out with their list. Expanding transportation services, health screenings, and housing access, boosting black business opportunities, preserving historically black college and university programs, and criminal justice policies, like creating a correctional ombudsman within the state's attorney general's office.
Will provide eyes and ears behind the walls.
Expanding expungement opportunities.
For far too long, we haven't allowed a sentence to be a sentence.
And unlike others pushing for juvenile justice changes,
this Black Caucus will protect our recent policies and laws related to the juvenile justice.
Right now, Maryland's juvenile justice laws are in the spotlight, like the Juvenile Justice Reform Act, preventing kids 13 and younger from facing certain misdemeanor charges, and the Juvenile Interrogation Act, requiring law enforcement to get permission from an attorney to question juveniles in custody, even if the parent agrees.
Does the caucus, does it support making changes to the Juvenile Interrogation Act?
The Legislative Black Caucus last year in the Maryland General Assembly passed really important foundational legislation to make sure that children in our communities are not interrogated without their constitutional rights of being able to ensure that they have access to an attorney.
Chair Janelle Wilkins, a Democrat from Montgomery County, adamant that her caucus does not want to see changes made.
I know that there's a proposal out there that would require
a defense attorney to be in person during questioning of a minor as perhaps a compromise to some of the other pushes to make changes to the legislation. Would you support that?
In terms of that legislation, I appreciate you raising specific bills, but that's not on our Black Caucus agenda, which is what we are here discussing today.
That proposal brought forward by state's attorneys Ivan Bates of Baltimore City and Aisha Braveboy of Prince George's County. The two top prosecutors argue investigations are hindered by the limited opportunities to question young people, and having an attorney in person could help.
We'll take a look at every bill as it comes. Thank you.
Baltimore City Democrat Senator Jill Carter quick to throw cold water on that idea.
I don't really see where it makes any sense.
Another Bates Braveboy priority, taking the guessing out of the Department of Juvenile Services intake process, instead requiring young offenders to see a judge right away for certain charges to determine if the case will move forward.
Should all of these decisions go to the prosecutor? My answer is no. I think the department is equipped to make certain decisions about whether someone should be charged or informally adjusted.
Even if the intake officer isn't necessarily an attorney?
I think we need to look at the qualifications and the process that's used. I think that we need to be clear that there is a trusted process in place. But if there is, I think that there's no reason that every single case be forwarded to the state's attorney.
Is that process adequate right now?
I don't know.
DJS already making changes to the intake process, at least in Baltimore City, where the former director was replaced following outcry from lawmakers after 2 young assault suspects were released from custody. But critics of the current system, like the state's attorney from Montgomery County,
is youth crime down? Not by any measure of anybody who's paying attention.
Argues there needs to be changes made to help drive down juvenile crime numbers this session. Now, there is one area where there seems to be growing support, and that's ensuring that the funding already going to DJS is being spent on programs that see actual results. Now, whether that comes in the form of legislation or a change to DJS policy is a question that has yet to be answered. We're live in the State House. Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Mackenzie, thanks. That brings us to our question of the day. Should the Legislative Black Caucus push for juvenile justice reform? To make your voice heard, head to foxbaltimore.com/vote.
Also in Annapolis today, Governor Wes Moore is taking action to help children and families. The governor's Meantime, in the race for Maryland's open U.S. Senate seat, one Republican candidate is calling public safety his top priority. In fact, today, retired General John Teichert launched a law enforcement coalition made up of sheriffs from across the state. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor has more on who's involved and exactly what political experts are saying about the endorsement and his run. Rebecca?
Kai, today, Teichert securing the support of 4 county sheriffs with a promise to push tough on crime priorities in D.C. Now, those sheriffs, they represent Talbot, Worcester, Wicomico, and Dorchester County. At a press conference announcing their endorsement for the retired Air Force general, the sheriff saying Teichert's military background gives him a leg up in understanding the challenges facing local law enforcement. Teichert called the partnership a crucial piece to, quote, return to law and order in our communities.
I wanted them to know that I trusted them, that I appreciated them, and that ultimately I fully supported them. Unfortunately, here in Maryland and in many places around our country, our politicians, including my opponents, are saying just the opposite of that. As a result, we see these pro-criminal policies that ultimately degrade law and order in our communities.
They have the demographics against them.
According to political analyst John Deedy, a promise to prioritize public safety will resonate with voters, especially as a rise in juvenile crime takes center stage this legislative session in Annapolis. However, Deedy questions if it's enough to win over voters in a historically Democratic state.
The problem is this is a national election for the United States Senate, and we are a polarized country politically in Washington. Electing him to the Senate makes Mitch McConnell the majority leader. Also, Maryland is a strong Democratic state.
Deedy adds that the last time a Republican candidate won a U.S. Senate seat here in Maryland was over 4 decades ago in 1980. Reporting live in the control room, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
We are following a developing story in Baltimore County where the principal of Pikesville High School was allegedly recorded making racially charged comments.
Now, the school system says it's investigating that recording, which includes derogatory remarks about students and staff. But the principal's union is asking for any rush to judgment to be paused.
I seriously don't understand why I have to constantly put up with these dumb here every day. Between these ungrateful black kids who can't test their way out of a paper bag.
Well, the voice in that recording is allegedly Pikesville principal Eric Eiswort, seen here on the school's website. The 41-second clip includes derogatory comments about black students and some school staffers, as well as members of the Jewish community. In an email to parents Wednesday afternoon, Baltimore County School Superintendent Dr. Miriam Rogers called the statements deeply disturbing, but said they cannot confirm the veracity of the recording. As the school system investigates, the principals union is promising full cooperation.
In a statement to Project Baltimore, union leader Billy Burke writes, quote, "The outrageous language in the audio is not the language, thoughts, or character of Principal Eiswort." It goes on to say, "We ask that there be a pause in any rush to judgment and that we act respectfully to his family, staff, and to each other." The statement does not address previous reports indicating union leadership saying the recording may have been faked using artificial intelligence.
Well, Fox 45 News will stay on this story as the investigation continues to evaluate the authenticity of this recording. Still ahead tonight, a new tactic to hold violent repeat offenders accountable. The latest case shining a light on the effectiveness.
Governor Wes Moore unveils his budget proposal, but many big-ticket items are still unfunded. Fox 45 News takes a closer look at the potential impacts.
And we're one day closer to the divisional round showdown between the Ravens and Texans, with the team is cooking up ahead of Saturday's game at the Bank.
A live look at M&T Bank Stadium tonight. Anticipation is building as the Ravens gear up for their playoff match against the Houston Texans this Saturday right here in Baltimore. It is going to be a frigid cold game as another winter system is moving through the region tonight. And we have team coverage tonight getting you prepared to cheer on the Ravens. Meteorologist Wyatt Everhart breaking down the game day forecast for us, letting us know what conditions will be like so we can be prepared if you are heading out to M&T Bank Stadium. But let's start with Rocco DeSangro. He's previewing the big matchup for us. Rocco.
What's going on, Mary? They've been hard at work in Owings Mills, the Ravens have, and a lot has changed from that Week 1 regular season matchup between these two teams. While rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud, he's gotten so much better, so have the Ravens, adding more talent to their roster since that season opener. For one, Kyle Van Noy, who joined the team Week 4 from his couch only to set a career high with 9 sacks. And then you have the late addition of Dalvin Cook at running back, who is just 1 year removed from a 1,000-yard rushing season. Cook, who was originally signed to the practice squad, was just signed to the team's 53-man roster, and there's a good chance that he could be a factor in the backfield for the divisional round showdown.
Dalvin will be in there. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for him and for us. You know, be looking forward to seeing how he does. You know, it's new. We haven't seen him out there, just like you guys haven't seen him. We haven't seen him. We've seen him in practice. He looks good. And, you know, he's going to be out there like everybody else, trying to do whatever he can do to help us win the game.
They call it 31 number. I'm going to be out there. That's why I'm going. I'm going to be on the field. I'm going to be ready to make a play. But for me, though, honestly, you know, Gus, Justice, they put the work in all year, man. You know, you got to credit those guys. So whatever my role is, whatever they call upon me, they're going to get 1,000% out of that one.
While Cook is expected to get snaps in Saturday's game, it's uncertain whether or not that's going to be the case for Mark Andrews, the star tight end coming off that ankle injury. He was a full participant, though, for the second straight day in practice. He's being listed as questionable, Mary.
All right, Rocco, thanks. We hope he gets back out on the field. Well, fans are getting ready for the game with the Ravens pop-up shop at M&T Bank Stadium. The shop is open today until 7 and reopens tomorrow from 10 in the morning until 7 at night. Fans will be able to choose from the largest selection of Ravens gear in the city. Plus, the shop is easy to get to with free parking in Lot B. Now, Purple Fridays will live on through the remainder of the Ravens playoff run, thanks to Governor Wes Moore. He announced that every Friday will be recognized in Maryland as long as the Ravens are still playing in the playoffs. In a statement, Governor Moore said, in part, quote, "Maryland, this is Baltimore's time, which means we've got to show the nation why the Ravens flock is the most loyal, most supportive, and most formidable fan base in all of professional football." Well, many of you are sharing how you're showing off your purple pride. LaSonia sent us these adorable pictures of her cockapoo puppy, Rihanna. Hi, Rihanna, all decked out in her Ravens gear, even going out in the snow for a little bit. Whether you are heading down to the stadium or going to the game to watch, or going to a watch party, or simply hanging out at home, we want to see how you're cheering on the Ravens. Scan that QR code right there on your screen. It'll take you to foxbaltimore.com, where you can upload your pictures and videos. It's all powered by Stackla.
We're talking about that game day forecast. You know, not quite Green Bay, Wisconsin weather, but not too far off of that, as we see temperatures starting in the mid 20s and falling into the low 20s, and wind chill factors be down in the teens, even feeling like maybe 10 degrees around halftime. So if you're tailgating, if you're going to the game, you know you need to layer up big time. Make sure you got the thick mittens on, too. All right, here's the big setup here across the state tonight. We've got clouds increasing out ahead of our main system, which, again, is still kind of getting itself organized. All our modeling has been fairly consistent, showing that basically, wow, we're going into cyberspace here, showing basically that we have had definitely a trend toward several inches of accumulating snow. And there's the Inner Harbor for you with the snow already down. Calm conditions right now ahead of this next weather maker. Our winter weather advisory continues for all of Central Maryland. Really kicks in tonight after midnight. This will be a primarily, let's call it 4 a.m. to noon event tomorrow, but the early afternoon will still feature snow showers and still feature some cleanup from a couple of inches of accumulation probably. So temperatures now hovering around the 30 to 32 degree mark, set to fall lower. We'll have 20s overnight tonight. As that snow arrives, that means, yes, it will stick, not just on top of the snowpack we have and the cars and the sidewalks, but yes, the roads too. Anything untreated, the snow will stick. Road temperature is going to be below freezing. So it's a snowy Friday scenario. And then we're talking about blustery cold conditions on Saturday. Ultimately, though, we're going to swing the pendulum the other way as we go into early next week. And push temperatures back up even to 50 degrees plus. In the meantime, just the opposite, getting more wintry tonight as our dry air steadily gives way to some winter moisture coming in the form of an area of low pressure that brings with it just enough instability and moisture to bring down a couple inches of snow. Now, here's your timing. You see this thing's edging in toward 4 a.m. Should be getting better organized by that time. Sweeps in that snow out of the west. Here we go toward lunchtime tomorrow. A lot of the significant snow will be then pooling away, but we'll still have those snow showers wrapping in around the backside of the system through probably 8, 9 o'clock tomorrow evening. In the wake of that, a cold northwesterly flow. We'll have a bright day Saturday, but a wintry day with that wind chill. And yes, the accumulations will likely be in that 2 to 4 inch range for most of the Baltimore area, a little more toward PA, a little less toward DC. There's the trend, cold Saturday, but much milder as we go into the early part of next week.
Wyatt, thanks. As temperatures drop, warming shelters are available in the city. According to the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, shelters are open through February 14th, anytime the temperatures drop below 32 degrees. If you're looking for help in the city, you can call that number on your screen, 443-984-9540, for referrals. And anytime the snow hits, you can have up-to-the-minute forecast right at your fingertips. Download the Fox 45 Weather Authority app to search WBFF in your app store. Coming up after the break, the future of Ukraine aid up in the air, the crucial steps that still remain. Plus, comments about ousting House Speaker Mike Johnson, a topic of discussion, the arguments from both sides, and how the Speaker is responding. And we are following some breaking news. We're looking live at Washington, D.C., where lawmakers have managed to avert a partial government shutdown. In the past 30 minutes, Congress passed a short-term funding extension ahead of the Friday deadline. The bill now goes to President Biden to be signed into law. Lawmakers must still pass several full-year spending bills before the new deadline in March. Well, Well, does the White House have an alternative plan if Congress fails to move forward on more aid for Ukraine? According to Politico, citing a White House official, President Biden is prepared for that possibility. He is not going to roll out what a plan B might look like, mainly because he wants to keep Russia off balance. This as U.S. lawmakers wrestle over border security in exchange for that aid.
Every meeting I was in Europe, the first question was, will the United States continue to partner with 50 other countries who in combination are providing the funding, the support for Ukraine? I am optimistic, even confident that we will, but the politics of the House are concerning.
We understand that there's concern about the safety, security, sovereignty of Ukraine, but the American people have those same concerns about our own domestic sovereignty and our safety and our security.
Well, House Speaker Johnson has already said any immigration deal that doesn't include H.R. 2, which allows for the rapid expulsion of migrants, is a no-go for the House. Well, some moderate Democrats say they are less inclined to oust House Speaker Johnson than they were with Kevin McCarthy. That's what Congresswoman Susan Wild tells Axios. Wild says Johnson hasn't been around long enough to wear out his welcome, while others believe removing him would only toss Congress into more turmoil. Johnson was recently asked about whether he's worried about being removed.
No, I have a job to do. We all have to do our jobs. Marjorie Taylor Greene is very upset about the lack of oversight over the funding and the lack of a articulation of a plan.
That's a reference to Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who says she will put out a motion to vacate herself if a bill giving Ukraine aid goes through. Democrats want Johnson to prove he's trustworthy, starting with not backing down from his spending deal. Still ahead tonight, we continue to track our next weather maker and the impact it could have on your morning commute.
I'm Kayla Gaskins in Washington. Coming up, the CEO of one of the world's largest banks has a warning for President Biden.
A convicted felon who once had an attempted murder charge overturned is sentenced in federal court.
The U.S. Attorney for Maryland says this case is an example of his office going after violent criminals by any means necessary. Fox 45's Alexa Asheville joins us in studio with details. Alexa.
Yes, Kai and Mary, the U.S. Attorney for Maryland, Eric Barron, has vowed to focus on guns and repeat violent offenders and getting both off the streets by any legal means necessary. Today's sentencing, one of the latest examples.
Here inside federal court, a judge sentenced convicted felon and repeat gun offender Terrence Peavy to more than 2 years in prison. The 41-year-old's conviction part of a federal plea deal, guilty to possession of a firearm and ammunition by a prohibited person. The case, initially filed in state court, details back in February 2023, investigators witnessed over Baltimore's City Watch cameras Peavy selling drugs in South Baltimore's long-troubled Brooklyn Homes community. After a brief pursuit, the document goes on to say Peavy was arrested and found to be in possession of a .32 caliber revolver, a violation because Peavy was on probation at the time and also had 5 prior convictions dating back to 2002 that prohibited him from possessing a firearm, according to court documents. One of those cases, part of a plea deal, after a prior attempted murder conviction was overturned back in 2022. Guilty after guilty, consequence after consequence that didn't stop Peavy. The Office of the U.S. Attorney for Maryland says this case is an example of the enhanced focus on guns, RICO cases, and repeat violent offenders.
We are headed in the right direction.
Just 2 weeks ago, U.S. Attorney for Maryland Eric Barron, alongside other federal, state, and local partners, announcing plans to ramp up his Al Capone style of prosecution in 2024.
Going forward, we will continue investigating and prosecuting large RICO cases like the one in court this morning, but we will also continue to employ strategic and preventative law enforcement measures, especially by using any legal means necessary to remove those who illegally possess or use guns in our communities.
Peavy, the latest example.
And this afternoon, Barron released a statement saying Mr. Peavy represents exactly the kind of wanton offender we're looking to take off the streets. Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Alexa, thank you. Lawmakers are working to finalize the governor's budget proposal while avoiding a massive deficit.
Governor Moore says he's focused on the future, promising to fully fund the state's blueprint for education, or the Kerwin plan. The governor also announced $1.8 million for small business innovation research and $500,000 for the Pavel Lapere Innovation Acceleration Grant Program.
Now, the governor's budget comes in just over $63 billion for fiscal year 2025, which he says shrinks the state's structural deficit without raising taxes on residents.
But with many big ticket items still on the table, Fox 45's Jessica Babb hears from county leaders with questions about how they will be funded. Jessica?
When it comes to expensive issues like transportation and education, some counties say there need to be long-term funding solutions in place so they're not stuck holding the bag, facing the brunt of the bills.
Happy Budget Day.
With a new budget announced,
We will achieve each of these goals without raising taxes on Marylanders.
and Maryland facing a daunting deficit.
This budget shrinks the structural deficit by 34%.
There are some tough decisions and challenges ahead.
There's key questions about how Governor Wes Moore's proposal will get paid for.
The funding sources are disappearing.
My major concern is to ensure that we are not passing the buck to the counties long term to carry too much of the burden that we can't sustain or afford.
Andrew Friedson, Montgomery County's council president, says with $3.3 billion in cuts to the Department of Transportation, it was going to cost them big in the county.
Included in those cuts, among others, was over $17 million in cuts to local bus service. Our local ride-on bus service serves some of our most vulnerable residents.
But since Governor Moore has announced a one-time, one-year solution of taking $150 million from the state's rainy day fund to offset some of those costs.
Well, it stops the bleeding, certainly. It's kind of like sending an ambulance to stabilize the patient.
But now the clock is ticking with the next challenge of sustainability. with a need for long-term solutions.
A punt on the difficult conversations on that expensive wish list of projects that do not have funding sources, punting those difficult conversations to next year.
And it's not just transportation. There's other big-ticket items that will cost billions, from $1 billion in clean energy initiatives, $3 billion on the Red Line project, and $3.8 billion on the Kirwan Commission and education reform.
We're struggling with Kirwan.
It was a gut punch. We need the state to step up to help us to fund it. And we need to make sure that we are doing it in a way that doesn't fall back on the historical challenges we have faced, that when state challenges occur, they lean on the counties to solve them.
There's other initiatives in Governor Moore's budget, including $127 million in funding for local law enforcement agencies, $115 million to address housing needs, and $270 million for the child care scholarship, among many others. When the bills come due, the burden could still be on taxpayers.
These burdens that are passed along to the county do not free our residents from the burdens to pay for them.
While some county leaders say they are optimistic about working with Governor Moore's administration, the state's deficit is only expected to grow in the next few years, which could put taxpayers in a tricky situation with the potential for tax increases on the horizon. Jessica Babb, Fox 45 News.
Thank you, Jessica. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost will be in Annapolis following every step of this year's session over the next 3 months. You can watch all of her coverage on air and online at foxbaltimore.com.
New tonight, the family of one of the victims in last year's mass shooting at the Edmondson Village Shopping Center is calling on police and prosecutors to find and arrest the second suspect. Back in January of last year, 16-year-old Deontay Dorsey, a student at Edmondson High School, was killed in that shooting. 4 other students were hurt. Photos and videos circulating at the time showed there were 2 possible shooters, and just weeks after the incident, one of those suspects was arrested. Since then, Tharu Vignaraja, the attorney representing the family, says they have heard little about a second arrest.
The lack of urgency is not acceptable. The decision that the case is cleared and therefore is not on anyone's mind, is not on anyone's plate, is not justice. And they want to make sure that the authorities responsible for bringing these killers to justice, not just in this case, but in all cases, do not think this family has moved on. Do not think that they're going to let Dante just be another statistic.
Deontay Dorsey was the second juvenile killed in 2023. So far this year, 6 people have been killed, the first being a juvenile. The family says there needs to be more urgency to stop this alarming trend.
Live looks across Maryland tonight as we track our next weather maker, a snowy weather system that's closing in on us.
That's right. Harford County and Carroll County Public Schools announcing they will be closed tomorrow. We will continue to track school closures, bring you updates throughout the night.
Let's go right over to meteorologist Wyatt Everhart for the very latest. Wyatt.
Hey, Kai, Mayor. Yeah, winter weather advisory is up for the entirety of the day on Friday. Now, we're fine this evening. Want to make that clear. But as we go even into the early morning commutes, snow showers are likely, and we know that overnight the temperatures continue to drop below freezing. What does that mean? Everything that falls sticks unless it's a freshly treated road surface. You're talking about slippery conditions tomorrow. As we get the leading edge of the system, it's cloud cover for now, but on the back side of the system, that's where the moisture is going to come in. And as we look at future scan, you can see the system coming right through the state into the early Friday timeframe, beginning to clear out by Friday afternoon. So hour by hour planning overnight is going to get dicier and dicier as you work toward that morning drive and into the midday as well. Talking about slick conditions out there as temperatures hover at and below freezing. We talk more about the totals and all the other details coming up.
Wyatt, thank you. Well, as the roads become slick overnight, officials are reminding truckers of emergency truck parking locations along major roadways throughout the state. The green parking symbols on the map represent the regular truck parking. The blue parking symbols represent emergency truck parking. During 6 or more inches of snow, tractor-trailer drivers can use commuter park and ride lots, the blue symbols, to wait out the storm. You can find a list of all the helpful safety tips on our website, foxbaltimore.com.
And wake up tomorrow morning with Fox 45 Morning News as we track the overnight snow and freezing temperatures. Meteorologist Amy Aronson has your full forecast starting at 4:30 a.m. The head of one of America's largest banks has a warning for President Biden.
National correspondent Kayla Gaskins reports.
As political and business elites gather in Davos, Switzerland for the annual World Economic Forum, attention zeroing in on events with global impact, like the 2024 U.S. presidential election. J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon sharing some pointed advice.
I wish the Democrats would think a little more carefully when they talk about MAGA.
Warning this type of harsh criticism of MAGA Republicans by the left.
MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law.
That's dominated party rhetoric since the 2016 cycle could hurt Democrats this go around.
You could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic.
I mean, really? Could we just stop that stuff and actually grow up and treat other people with respect?
Dimon arguing it's incorrect to say Trump supporters share his polarizing character, pointing out Trump's policy successes add to his political popularity.
He was kind of right about NATO, kind of right about immigration. He grew the economy quite well.
China virus.
Tax reform worked. He was right about some of China.
Towson University professor emeritus Richard Vatz points out Dimon identifies as a centrist Democrat, and the advice he's giving Biden is sound.
So start emphasizing why we should vote for you on policy issues that will win you some votes. Don't keep harping on how bad the people are who support Donald Trump, because this is an ever-increasing number of people who are concerned about the country.
This comes as data from a new January ABC Ipsos poll shows those who approve of Biden sank to just 33%. That's not only the lowest point for his presidency, but it's a record low for any president in the last 15 years. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
And that brings us to our national question of the day. Who do you trust more on the issues that matter to you, Joe Biden or Donald Trump? To make your voice heard, head to foxbaltimore.com and click on that Pulse tab. And the results are in for Wednesday's national question of the day. We asked what issue is most important to you in the upcoming election. 47% said immigration, 39% said economy, 6% said foreign policy, and 8% said crime.
Well, coming up after the break, our Weather Authority team continues to track our next weather maker rolling through overnight, the conditions you need to be prepared for during the morning commute.
Janae Bowens here in Washington with a look at why Americans are spending less time in good health, even though they're living longer.